Hello, everyone, and welcome to Artic Consulting's Donor Management webinar. We're really excited to have you here today to talk through some scenarios about how to work with your donors and some other solutions that might help you with the management of donors. Just as a reminder, this webinar is recorded, and we will have the webinar available within 24 to 48 hours after this event. With that, very excited to have James Burke kick this off. Take it away, James.
All right, thanks, Catherine, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. My name is James Burke. I head up our nonprofit practice at Artic Consulting, and today I'd like to talk with you about donor management. So a very important area for a lot of nonprofits. So we'll get into a little bit about our company and how we can help nonprofits navigate all the different technology offers that are out there. And then I want to go into how nonprofits can best track donations, how they can look at who's donating to them and create something called a donor profile. And then I want to talk a bit about a specific area of software called customer relationship management, or CRM, because solutions like that are pretty good for tracking a lot of things about your nonprofit's donations and donors. And there's a really good offers out there for nonprofits that you might not be aware of. And so I'll show you a couple examples of those, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So let's talk about Artic. We were established in 2018. We're a Gold Microsoft partner, but we're not limited to Microsoft. We actually have a lot of experience with other software vendors such as Google and Amazon, and we specialize in helping businesses and nonprofits with their technology. We can do things like cloud migrations, we can create custom applications, we can work with large data sets and create business analytics reporting and modernize your operations. So Catherine and I, between us, we've got 25 years experience working on nonprofit boards and helping nonprofits with all their operations as well as their technology. And so last year we started the nonprofit practice to leverage our abilities to help nonprofits. And one of the things we help nonprofits with are finding out all of the different, navigating all the different offerings out there. Some you may not be aware of, and trying to find what is the best fit for your organization. Now, Microsoft does have a pretty extensive offering with their philanthropy program. So if you're a qualified 501c3, there's a lot of software you can get from Microsoft at no cost, and other software you can get at a reduced cost. You can also get $3,500 a year in Azure credits. Azure is Microsoft's data center platform, and so you could use that for a variety of different ways. You can use it to host your website. You can use it to create an internal application you're going to use for your nonprofit's operations, or other ways to support your organization. And we also have, as I mentioned, experience with Google and Microsoft and Amazon's offerings. So Google, for example, has a pretty comparable solution for nonprofits that provides email collaboration software, things like Google Drive and Google Docs, Google Forms you could use for a lot of different variety of ways at a nonprofit. And then Amazon has an offering for their AWS cloud solution where you can, if you qualify as a 501c3, you can get $2,000 a year in credits from Amazon to use for a variety of purposes. So like I said, we have a lot of experience helping nonprofits procure these offers and helping them leverage them once they have them. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. If you've been on any of our past webinars, you may have seen a preview of this. This is our nonprofit solutions framework, and we've been working on this. We've been developing this for the last few months. This is our roadmap for a nonprofit that covers all of the typical areas that they would need technology for and what it can be applied to do. Now, your nonprofit may not be doing everything on this slide, and that's okay. We can actually help you enable some of these new areas, but also do these things better by applying technology in a smart way. So the 3 areas on the top, we call those verticals. Those are areas that nonprofits typically operate in for their daily operations and their fundraising, and things that are very critical and important to a nonprofit. So managing their volunteers, making sure that there's good reporting on volunteer time, and that's rolling up to the organization, and there's transparency across the organization about that. I talked about that, a webinar specifically about that last month. Then grant management, we covered that a bit last week. How do you apply for grants for your nonprofit? How do you have multiple grant proposals going at the same time? And how do you make sure that you're successful and can track those successes and failures over time? But then today we're going to talk about that middle vertical, which is donor management and some of those scenarios there. What we have across the bottom are horizontal areas where these are infrastructure type areas that cut across everything a nonprofit does. So things like program management or project management. A lot of initiatives that nonprofits do require good project management and understanding how the execution is going and looking at different projects at the same time to make sure that resources are allocated correctly. I worked at Microsoft for 20 years as a project manager, so I have a lot of experience with different ways to track activities like that. And we have a lot of experience at Artic using both the Agile and waterfall methodologies for nonprofits. And there's different times you'd want to use one over the other. We can help you figure that out. With a solution like Microsoft's 365 or Google for Nonprofits, you're going to cover a lot of the areas in operations management and communication management, being able to collaborate well with your staff, being able to make sure that you're storing your knowledge in a place that you can find it over time, that you're not emailing around documents and losing track of who has the latest version, losing track of someone's work because you overwrote the version that they worked on, and then also using a variety of devices to do your work at a nonprofit. Being out in the field and being able to do stuff on your mobile phone that maybe you didn't realize was possible before. Those are all things we can help you navigate. Virtual meetings and like we're using Microsoft Teams right now, so doing webinars like this, doing online workshops, we can help you set up that infrastructure to be able to all your programs virtually that you maybe were doing on site and had to pause because of COVID. And then finally, infrastructure management. So the things that you'd use a data center, a cloud platform for, things like website hosting and data storage and internal applications and workflows. We can help you through all those scenarios and help you work more efficiently by applying technology. So future webinars that we do will cover this nonprofit solutions framework. We've also done a few blog articles on our website about these, so I invite you to check those out. So let's talk a little bit more about donations and donor management. So donations are key to most nonprofits. And it kind of goes without saying, but I want to put it out there anyway. If you're a 501c3 organization, that means that you can receive donations from individuals and companies and other nonprofits, and those are tax deductible. So if someone is trying to look for some additional itemized deductions on their IRS tax return, one thing they can do is they can give to donate clothes to a charity, or they can donate a car to a charity. But another thing they could do is they can provide a money donation, and any 501c3 can accept one of those and issue a receipt to that person or organization, and that could go right on the tax return as a deduction. So your responsibility as the nonprofit is to keep accurate records and to make sure that if someone asks for a receipt of their donation, 6 months or a year after they give it, that you're able to still give that receipt. That will definitely happen for you if you take a lot of donations. So making sure you're keeping accurate track and having a technology solution that you can rely on, that's going to be there long term for you to put your donation records into, is critical for a nonprofit. And then another thing that some nonprofits do that others don't, and in my opinion, everyone should try to do, is collect some information along with their donation. So if someone's going to give you money, try to find out a little bit about them and why they're giving you the money and where they want it to go towards. Obviously, they're giving you a donation because they believe in your mission, but why do they believe in your mission? What aspect of your mission and your activities are they supporting, and do they want to see their donation go towards? By asking these questions, you can make sure you can provide some transparency to them that, hey, your donation actually went towards what you thought it would, and that fosters repeat donations. So it's a very important area that the people that you're donating, that are donating to you, are resources that you can tap in the future when you have a new initiative. Another thing that is often overlooked with nonprofits is being able to accept donations that are recurring. So not just a one-time donation, but if someone wants to donate to you monthly or annually, then have the ability for them to do that. And that goes into what type of payment processing solution you're going to use for your nonprofit. A lot of nonprofits use one or the other, but they don't always do recurring donations, and so that might be something to look for. And there are ways as well, if your payment processor doesn't handle that natively, for you to still set that up with a technology solution so that you can remind people that you're billing them every quarter, every month, or every year, and give them the ability for them to change that if they need to. A lot of donors will put in a recurring donation, but then they'll forget about it, and then a year goes by and they wonder why their credit card was charged. And having the ability for them to self-manage that is very important. It'll reduce the time that your staff needs to manage all of that, all the back and forth with that scenario. So there's a lot of great programs out there for donation tracking. You know, I'm a fan of using one called MoonClerk that has recurring donations, but a lot of people swear by PayPal. There's also Square and Stripe are two really good payment processing solutions. There's also one called Get Beyond. So look for one. And one of the things you want to look for is what are the fees that they charge. And it really depends on the size of your nonprofit. So another area that's important to look at are donor profiles. And what's a donor profile? Well, it's a description of the type of person that's most likely to donate to your nonprofit. And this can be specific records on specific donors, or it can be a persona of the type of donor that you'd like to receive. This can help a lot with your marketing, your communication, and also it can help a lot with deciding what types of events you want to put on. You can look at who's donating to us and what are the type of activities they typically like to do or like to participate in, and then you can organize things like that to foster more donors like that. So that this is a really key area. It's also really good to classify the donors you already have in these ways, and doing stuff like this makes this more of a data-driven approach versus just having a list of people that have donated to you that you really don't know much about. You don't really see parallels between the different people. That's usually the role that a lot of smaller nonprofits are in. They just take whatever donations they get and they don't really think through the type of person that's donating. But by doing that, you can actually, like I said, tailor your activities and your marketing towards that audience and foster even more donations that way. Now, what data to collect? I'm actually going to ask Catherine about this. She's an expert at Artic on privacy. A lot of these areas that we're going to collect data from may touch privacy laws in the US and Europe. And so, Catherine, what advice do you have for this area?
Yes, and the laws are changing every year. It seems there's a new set of laws, but you know, it's always good to be you know, very mindful and protective of your clients or your donors' data. There are some states or some areas where, you know, based on size, you may not be subject to quote unquote penalties. However, if your data, if you're collecting data and you're not telling people what data you're collecting, if you're processing their data or sharing it with anyone else, you could be, you know, breaching your privacy policy or your data governance. So I think a lot of the nonprofits that I've worked with in the past, especially ones that are smaller, you know, haven't really had to think about privacy policies, their data retention plans, what they do with the information from their donors, and just have it in potentially spreadsheets that they email around. You have to be very careful, even if you're small enough that you may not be you know, violating any specific you know, laws based on where you're located. You still have to keep in mind that, you know, your donors' privacy and how you use their information and being as transparent as possible is of the utmost importance. And I think with all the things that you talk about, James, you know, not even how you use their data, but just transparency within, you know, the nonprofit organization doesn't stop, you know, at the information that you have on your donor. So that's my 2 cents on the information that you're storing, and, you know, making sure that you're doing all the best practices for retention. And you're also very clear with your donors how you'll be using their information.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine.
Of course.
So some of the areas to collect that you might collect, biographical data, things like someone's age, gender, marital status, where they work, whether they have children. Now, some of these, you know, not all of these are going to be relevant to your nonprofit, so you might not want to collect all this, but the things that might be relevant are listed there. And again, this is highly sensitive information. People don't generally like it when you're collecting data like this and you're not keeping it very private and secure, so that even others at the nonprofit, if they don't have a need to know, can access it. So the system you use to do this is, as Catherine mentioned, very important to be transparent about, and making sure it's secure and is using best practices for privacy. Other data to collect are the gifts that they gave to your nonprofit, so the donations, the donations over time, the average donations, the largest donations. Have they given to other nonprofits? And what types of nonprofits have they given to? And have they supported nonprofits in other ways, like volunteering? So how to collect data like this? Well, your nonprofit, I would start just by looking at what your nonprofit already has, because you likely have a bunch of data you're not tapping into yet to build a donor profile. Things like event registrations and contact forms, even questions people have emailed into you, are all things that you can mine for data as you're building out a set of profiles for your donors. You also may want to do a questionnaire or a survey around one of your events, or even one that you can send after someone donates. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples on the next slide of questions that you can ask on a survey like that. And then a third way is grabbing profiles off of Facebook and LinkedIn, Twitter, the social media outlets, but also if there's a specific donor that you're trying to learn more information about, you can always do a Google search on them and see if they have any biographical data out there on their company site or their academic institution, or even a personal homepage. A lot of people have those too. And then a fourth way to collect data is to use a prospect research tool. So this would be more for a larger nonprofit, because these are typically somewhat expensive tools to pay for. They usually are a monthly fee or an annual fee, but this would actually allow you to do searches on donors across several other nonprofits, and find donors find information about donors, but also find new donors that have given to other nonprofits. This is a good way to find those new donors that haven't worked with your nonprofit, but that have worked with others similar to you. And then the last thing I'll mention is donors are a resource. As I said before, if someone's given you, a donation like $100, it doesn't mean that they couldn't be $1,000 or even more of a donor for you if you reach out to them and pitch them something specific that really inspires them, and they can really, wrap their beliefs around and their own personal altruistic goals around. They could actually donate a lot more if you target them in the right way, a lot of those donors. So next one is going to be survey questions. So here's some example questions you can ask a donor. And again, you can do this, imagine sending this survey out to everyone who attended one of your events, or sending it out to, if you have paid members, sending it out to all your members once a year, or if someone donates, maybe following up with them a couple of days later or a week later with a survey like this. So what do they care about? Why did they donate to you? What do they expect from your organization in terms of how they expect you to fulfill your mission? And what do they think about what you're doing now? What's their comments or opinion on the programs and initiatives you're currently doing? Also, what are their goals for being a donor with you? Are they expecting to get anything out of a donation to your organization? Is there something that they maybe want to volunteer for that you're not currently doing? And are there would something hold them back from helping you in some way? You can figure that out and then maybe alter the way you're soliciting volunteers based on that. And then finally, where do they get their information about your nonprofit? And who influences their decisions? Those are all things that map into a donor profile that will help you, again, tailor what you're doing online to market your nonprofit. It will help you figure out what's the best way to engage your existing donors and solicit new ones by putting on different types of events and reaching out to them in the communities that they already are in. Okay. Next, I want to talk a little bit about reporting needs. So if you're a nonprofit collecting donations, what are some of the things you should be reporting either internally or externally? So I mentioned giving donation receipts out. That's just a core thing. You need to have the ability to do that, especially if it's way after the fact. If someone comes to you a year later and says, hey, I was at this event a year ago and I donated $20, I never got a receipt. Can you give me a receipt now, because I'm doing my taxes and I want to put that on my my tax return. Also, it's always interesting to look at internally among the leadership of the nonprofit how your donations are coming in, how this month is over last month, how this quarter is over last quarter, how this year is over last year, and where they're coming from. Not just location of the donation and the people, the location of where the people were, but the demographics. And again, this goes into donor profiles, but what type of people are donating to us? And are specific fundraising campaigns you're doing more successful than others? Because maybe that's a way to look at how you can do more of those to increase donations overall. Now, the two that are in red, these are ones that here at Artic we specifically like to focus on, because these are ones that usually nonprofits need a little bit of help with figuring out how to report on. So the first one is how donations map to programs. In general, nonprofits will just take donations in, and then it'll go into their general operating fund, and then they'll spend out of that for all their initiatives. And there's not really a tie between a specific donation and a specific program or spend category. That's a missed opportunity that we see, because some donors want to know that their donations are going into a specific area. And if you're able to tell them that, if you're able to send them a report a year later that says, hey, you and other donors gave this much for this initiative, here's how that initiative went, here's what we spent the money on, and here's how successful we were. Well, that's going to be a great way for that donor to want to give more, and it's going to motivate them to give more, because you're hitting the thing that they wanted you to do. And so how donations are spent as well. Again, not always tracked by nonprofits. So looking at an individual donation and where it actually ended up, even if it wasn't mapped to a specific program, but just knowing where it went, that is another way that you can engage. You can send them a statement at the end of the year that says, here's the donation you gave us, and here's what we actually did with the money. And, maybe that's an opportunity to ask some survey questions of, does this match what your expectations were, or what were your expectations? And, is it okay if we do this area with you, or do you want your donations to go somewhere else? And then finally on the slide, federal and state reporting requirements. So most nonprofits need to fill out the 990N for the IRS. That's a really quick tax reporting form. Nonprofits that are 501c3s are tax exempt, so they don't have to actually pay taxes, but they do have that reporting requirement that they have to send in the 990N postcard. And it asks a couple of really basic questions, like what's your overall operating expenses for the year? But it is important to get that in, because if you don't report that every year, you will eventually lose your nonprofit 501c3 status with the IRS. And then some states will also have their own reporting requirements and their own forms that you'll need to fill out annually. So check your state for what they need. And in addition, one of the things we like to help nonprofits with is GuideStar, because, and if you're not familiar with GuideStar, you can kind of think of it as the Better Business Bureau for nonprofits. It's an organization that provides profiles on nonprofits that can prove their legitimacy and collects basic information about what they're working on. And they also issue seals of approval that are on the bronze, silver, and gold levels. There's also a platinum level now. And if you earn one of those, it gives your donors confidence that you're a legitimate nonprofit, that you're doing what you say you're supposed to be doing, and you're meeting all the reporting requirements that are legally needed in the area you operate in. GuideStar at the gold level will ask for specifics on the operations of your nonprofit. So, for example, if you're an educational nonprofit, they'll care about how many people you took through workshops and educational programs, and your registration rate for those. And also, a lot of times GuideStar will be interested in where your funding is coming from. And to get the silver level, you'll need audited financial statements or some details on your overall spending, which is over and above what the IRS would ask for. And I definitely recommend to most nonprofits that you pursue GuideStar seals, because it'll help your nonprofit gain legitimacy in a lot of ways, including giving some satisfaction and confidence to donors that you're a legitimate nonprofit and their donations are actually going somewhere that matters. Okay, next, we're going to talk a little bit about customer relationship management, so CRM tools. Now, this is an area that's generally looked at in the for-profit side of organizations. A lot of organizations have a sales department, and the CRM is the tool that the sales department will use. But increasingly, nonprofits are also looking at this set of software to help with what I've talked about in this webinar, their donations, their donors, and their campaigns to get donations. So that's sort of the areas I'm going to focus a little bit on with CRM. And we're not going to recommend a specific vendor for you today, but I am going to highlight 3 that we're familiar with at Artic that we've used in the past for nonprofits. And Microsoft Dynamics is also one we use internally at Artic. So we do have a lot of experience with these, but the specific CRM that you end up using really depends on what the needs of your organization are and the size of your organization and what you would be using it for. So again, what's a CRM? Let me just kind of go over that a little bit. You can think of it as a database, but it's a specialized database. It's one specifically designed to manage contacts. So you're managing your donors, you're managing partners and stakeholders, and you can think of it again as a digitized address book. And so all the things that you're going to do to communicate with those folks, their contact information, any notes you want to keep, are all going to be tracked in a system like this. Even donations, all 3 of these solutions have a story for donation management as well. So being able to track a lot of the things I've talked about in this webinar. So Civi CRM, that's the one a lot of nonprofits use. I think it is #1 in its category for nonprofit CRMs. It's been around for a while. I have experience using it. The thing about it that I think of it is a little buggy. It's not always easy to use. And it's a slightly older technology compared to the other 2 on the slide. And so there are certain things that it's not going to do as well as the other 2. But it is something that a lot of nonprofits use today. And there are a lot of ways to do what we've talked about with it. If you wanted to go get Civi CRM from them directly, they do have cloud hosted solutions that you can pay for that start at $10 a month. But there's also a way for you to download the software and install it yourself on your own cloud accounts with Azure or AWS, or you can set it up on a server that you may be using already for your website. And so there are actually options where you would be able to use the software for free with some work, with some technical support. So if that's an option for you, then Civi CRM might be a great free option for a small nonprofit. Now it's a little harder to customize Civi CRM versus the other 2, but it is possible. And again, it would require some coding effort. The integrations that it makes are also pretty limited. When I talk about integrations, it's how does this tool work with other tools you might be using, things like your email or your document management solution or your marketing tools that you may be using to do email campaigns. So something like MailChimp for email newsletters. It's going to have limited integrations compared to the other 2. So, but it is the #1 in its category, and it is something that we have experience with using. Zoho is a relatively new entry in the last few years. They have a lot of momentum, and they have a nonprofit offering specifically tailored for nonprofits that starts at $12 a year per user. They also have a commercial version that you can actually get a free version of. You can sign up for the free trial, and then you can continue using it for up to 3 users for free. Now, that's not going to give you the nonprofit solutions that they have, but if you just want a basic CRM that's a little bit more modern than Civi CRM, then that is a good option to take a look at. Zoho works really well with Gmail. It does work with Microsoft's Outlook, but not as good. It's a little buggy sometimes. And but there's a lot of things you could do with Zoho to run your email and marketing campaigns that are integrated with the CRM. There are a lot of ways to customize Zoho, and this is an area, customization is just an area I think any organization should look at when they're evaluating a CRM, because no CRM is going to be a perfect fit for your organization. You're going to have to do some work to make sure that it maps to the way you and your staff work. But Zoho does provide some really easy customizations where you don't have to write any code. You can just drag and drop and go into the settings of different areas of the tool and find and unlock new features and turn other ones off. So it's pretty customizable overall, I'd have to say. In terms of managing volunteers and donations, there are some options with Zoho, and I'll show you a couple screenshots later in this webinar, but there's also add-on tools that Zoho offers for free with their Zoho Creator, and they have specific tools for volunteer management and donation management, which are the same high fidelity that we would create or give to one of our clients to use. And then there's a lot of integrations available with Zoho. It works with many other tools, and they've spent a lot of time getting that right. So they're pretty good, have a pretty good story for integrations. And then finally, Microsoft's Dynamics. Again, this is a relatively new software. They've put in a lot of effort in the last few years to Dynamics. They've made a lot of changes to it to modernize it. But specifically, what I'm talking about today is the nonprofit offering that they have for 501c3s, and that is free for up to 5 users, but you do have to apply for it through a Microsoft partner, and that could take a little bit of time to actually do. So if you're interested in doing that, we can certainly help you, point you in the right direction there. And there's some specific features that the nonprofit offering in Dynamics has that the other for-profit versions of Dynamics don't have. They've actually spent some time in the last 6 months or so improving that story for nonprofits. Obviously, it's going to work very well with Microsoft tools because it's a Microsoft product. It does have some story of working with other, working with Google and other non-Microsoft tools. Customizations are there. Some of them are out of the box and able to be done easily in the settings like Zoho. Others may require you to put your technical hat on and you know, go into and look at the code or go in and look at some of the deeper aspects of Dynamics, like the data system it uses. So the customizations are possible, but they take a little bit more effort than the easy drag and drop that Zoho has. They have a great story for volunteer and donation management. I'm about to show that to you in the next slides. And then integrations are also there. They definitely have integrations with a lot of tools, including non-Microsoft tools. So looking at Dynamics, I want to show you 2 really quick screenshots of what that would look like. Here would be one of your donor profiles in Dynamics, and you can see this example as a specific person. You've got all their contact info, and you've got what organization they're with, which is described on here as an account, and then all their commitments as the donor. You have a nice little bar graph there that shows over the years how much they've donated. So this would be a great example of a donor profile, and you could really easily manage this. As you learn new things about this donor, you can easily come in here and plug those notes in. There are tabs for adding notes and integrating with your email so that as you're contacting this donor through your email, it's also being tracked in here, and you can actually have a record that other people in the nonprofit can see of the communications you have with that donor. And again, customizable, so if there's specific things your nonprofit wants to track for donors that aren't listed here, you can add in those details either on this screen or on the donor, the contact details screen, which is one of those tabs across the top. So pretty customizable and pretty easy for a nonprofit to just start using right away, but then also to make use of over time. And here would be a dashboard for a nonprofit. This is showing a bunch of different metrics for donations. So it's looking at different accounts, which in the previous example was a person's household, assuming that like maybe there's more than one person in that household donating. You also could have other organizations listed as accounts. Those might be what you see here for some of these areas of the pie charts. But this screen has things like the number of number of pledges per household, and how much money they're giving. The little line graph at the bottom left has year over year for all up for the nonprofit, and then also has some more granular details on the active households and how they've given over the years. So again, a solution like this, this would be out of the box for you to start using, but there'd be a lot of ways for you to tailor this to the information and the reports that you care about looking at. So let me give you a couple examples for Zoho. So this would be an example of Zoho's an account, basically looking at here's all of our donors for a specific area of the nonprofit. This is the fund for COVID, and the donors that they've had, and the donations, the individual donations that have come in. So, and you can see sort of on the left navigation, there's a bunch of different areas that the CRM has. You can look at the notes on this campaign. You can look at the specific donor lists and emails and activities that have happened. And then this would be looking at this specific campaign in a little bit more detail, looking at who inside the nonprofit is the owner of the campaign, the dates on it, the target revenue, and then how it's mapping to that. So again, Zoho, you could tailor to track different types of information for what your nonprofit is doing. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up and see if there are any questions on what I've covered so far today.
Yeah, James, I had a couple for you. The first is, and I know you talked extensively on some of the options. Can you speak specifically about the size of the nonprofit, and does that affect which CRM software should be selected?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not all nonprofits of different sizes are going to need the same technology solution. So if you're a smaller nonprofit, some of the more detailed CRMs, like things like Salesforce and Dynamics, may not be the best fit for you because of the level of customization and setup and onboarding they require and training they require. So, a smaller nonprofit, something like a Civi CRM or Zoho might be a better fit for you. It just depends. It depends on what you're going to be using the CRM for and how many people are going to be using it inside the nonprofit. That also is a factor, as how many user licenses you're going to need. As I mentioned, Zoho, if you wanted to use that, you have up to 3 for the nonprofit SKU. Right. For the for-profit normal CRM, which might be a good fit for a small nonprofit. Okay, great.
And there was another question about payment processing vendors, but I think you addressed this in that you listed a bunch off. I don't know if you have one that you would recommend as a quote unquote favorite, but
yeah, I mean, it's really about the biggest thing is looking at what you're going to use the payment processor for, mm-hmm. and the fees they have. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them will charge a percentage fee, but then they may also have a per transaction fee. So if you're a very small nonprofit and you only are going to have 100 donations or less on a given month, there's going to be one class of payment processors that fits better for you than the ones that are more high volume. So, if you have, 1,000 donations per month, looking at one that has a more flat rate than one that's a 10-cent per transaction fee is probably a better fit for you.
Okay, great. Or even if depending upon the average donation size, looking at the percentages, which may not make a difference for smaller donations, but if you process more, it's a bigger hit.
Exactly.
Great. That's all we have for right now.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, everyone. Let me just put the slide back up with some of our resources available. So if you want to book time with one of us on the Nonprofit Solutions team, we have a booking tool, and so you can feel free to do that. I'll put the link as well in the follow-up email you're all going to get as part of your registration for this webinar. And then we have several resources available on our website. We have a couple of case studies of nonprofits we've helped with these tools in the past, as well as a bunch of insights, which are like blog posts. So you can learn more about Artic. You can learn more about what we can do to help your nonprofit by going onto our website. And so thanks a lot for everyone for attending today. And we'd love to hear from you. So reach out to us if we can help your nonprofit in any way. And thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day.